Hi, I'm Josh, your English learning guide, and welcome back to the pronunciation and ear training course. Today we're moving on to the vowel sound ah. This vowel sound is extremely important, and there are some important details that we have to talk about with it. Now, the first important detail that we have to learn about this is that there's something called the cot merger. Now, the verb merge basically means to combine or to mix in some way, and a merger, the noun, is such a combination. Now, don't worry about the spelling here, but in American English there are two possibilities. One is where both of these will sound differently, and the second option is where they will both sound the same. If a speaker pronounces both of these the same, then they have the cot merger. This is something that developed in American English as well as certain parts of Canadian English, where if you don't have the cot merger, you have a sound here and you have a sound here. This would be ah, like we're talking about here. This, which the placement might not be perfect, the IPA symbol I think is something like this. It looks like a C, and that would be more like ah, instead of ah. And to me, this often sounds kind of British. So, for example, you might have learned that the word law was maybe pronounced more like law, and the word saw was maybe pronounced more like this, saw. I'm not entirely sure if law is supposed to have this sound or not if you don't have the merger, because I do have the merger, obviously. But that's a good example where, especially with this AW spelling, you might not know which one you should pronounce. And so, because I have the cot merger, and because you now only have to learn one vowel instead of two, the way that I will be teaching you is the cot merger. So we will not have this sound here, and the ah sound, instead of being here, will be where I place it, which is right here. So people who speak with the cot merger, the ah is placed here, not more forward. The only reason why I want you to have that information is because you might find other teachers on YouTube, or maybe other teachers in person, like if you take classes on italki, then they might teach you these two sounds separately. And I actually have seen, I looked it up, I have seen some teachers on YouTube that teach you these two separate sounds. But why learn two sounds when there are native speakers who naturally only use the one sound? It makes it easier for you, right? Now that you know that, if you have any questions, leave them down below. Otherwise, we will move on. Okay, so as I said, right, we have the top of the mouth here. Your mouth is open, and we're using the back part of the tongue. So what's gonna happen, because you're opening your mouth, but you're using the back, your tongue is gonna kind of feel maybe like it's like this, but we really have to get it open. Ah. Now, just like with this ah sound, you don't have to open as wide as possible, right? However, especially because we need to get the tongue down here into the back, the mouth does need to be very, very open, maybe even more so than the ah sound. Okay, so if I were to open my mouth as wide as possible, ah, is too much. I can open my mouth quite wide. So we want to say ah. Front, ah, back, ah. Now, as usual in actual speech, it might not be quite that open, but especially if you speak a language such as Russian, where you don't tend to open your mouth very much in your native language, you definitely want to make sure that you get this open. Even if it's a little uncomfortable at first, you have to practice it. And one good rule of learning new sounds, especially new vowel sounds, is that if your tongue doesn't hurt, you're probably not doing it right, unless you already have the sound exactly or very, very similar, like the E. Let's go ahead and take a look at spelling patterns. This particular sound is a little more complicated than these sounds. So we know that over here, usually EE or EA is the most common way to spell the first sound. The letter I, with no silent E after it, is usually the most common way to spell the I sound, like it. This, the the most common way to spell that is just the letter E. And then the A sound, the most common way to spell that is just the letter A, again with no silent E at the end of the word. This one, unfortunately, does not have a single letter common spelling. You see this W here, but you probably notice I'm not saying ow, right? I'm saying ah, ah. One of the most common ways to spell this is an A with a silent W. Yes, silent W. So this is a common mistake that pretty much every English learner makes. I've had many students who make this mistake, but this W is just spelling. Why? Because if we just had the A, we would want to say ah. Just like over here, if we take man and we put an E, it changes this to A. For that exact same reason, if we put, say, S-A, I would probably try to pronounce that sa. Sa, right? Like in the word sad. So a native English speaker would most likely look at this and even though this is not a word, probably think ah. But if I put a W here, because this is a common spelling pattern, a native English speaker is going to see this and want to pronounce ah. Okay? Saw, saw. So do not round your lips. You see a W, but there's no W. Do not round your lips. This might be something you have to fix and be very conscious of when you practice. This is another reason why it is so important to start with pronunciation when learning a language like English that does not have a phonetic script. Very, very important. It will make your life so much easier, but here we are now. So let's fix it while we're here. So we have the AW spelling pattern, and let's actually go ahead and combine the spelling pattern with example words. So for AW, we have law, saw, jaw, which is this part of your mouth here, you open your jaw, claw, which is like the sharp nail that an animal, like a cat, might have, so they scratch you, claw, and draw. Okay, so this is, right, if I draw a pretty little picture here, I don't know, make a face. Okay, that's draw. I drew a face, past tense drew. So all of these end in AW and they're pronounced ah. Okay, if you see AW, I don't think there are any exceptions. This should always be ah. There might be exceptions because it's English, but that's pretty solid. So if you see AW, it's pretty safe to say ah. Now, of course, we also do have this word, AWE. Now it's not at the end, which is fine. And this word means like deep surprise and disbelief. So if you see something, like you see a beautiful sunset or something, and it just is so magical, so like you've never seen anything like that before, you're just like, oh, wow. Okay, that would be awe. And another example, we have the word awkward. And so this AW here is again, silent W, ah. Now another common spelling pattern is AL. This spelling pattern is usually ah, sometimes it's not. There are cases where it's not. So in the word half, there's no L sound here, but it's actually the ah sound, this front sound here. So that's an exception, okay? So there are some exceptions in this spelling pattern. I don't think there are exceptions for this spelling pattern, but usually when you see AL, it will be ah. And again, this L is still going to be silent, just like this W is silent. So it, just like the W marks that this A is pronounced ah, this L, silent L, marks that this A is pronounced ah. Why do we have two different ones? Because it's English. It has a complicated history and we don't need to worry about all that. But if we look at some example words, talk. So many English learners try to pronounce this talk, talk. Okay, there's no L there. Absolutely no L. It's T plus A plus K. Talk. 3 sounds. We also have walk. We have stalk. Okay, now notice these all end with K, but they won't always end with K. So if we look at the word all. Now this might sound a little bit different, and as we'll learn later, English has 2 L sounds. We're not going to worry too much about that right now. The half L, you don't touch the top. It's more like you pull your tongue back inside the mouth. Again, we'll talk about that later. It sounds more like a vowel sound. It sounds like ol, ol. Now, when we say all, we could fully pronounce the L. Normally we don't. All, all. Okay, so again, this is a silent L, so we would have a plus ul, all, all. And that's okay. But normally when there's an L at the end of a word or the end of a syllable, it will be pronounced as a half L. So we would say all. And because of the movement from a to ul, it can kind of sound like maybe that ah isn't ah, but it does start in the ah position. So this is another example, the word all, that uses this spelling pattern. It's just we add the extra L because there is supposed to be an L sound at the end of the word, even though the first L is just spelling, it's silent. And there are many words exactly like this. We have fall, call, mall, a place where you shop. Many, many, many words with this ALL ending. There is one more spelling pattern that is pretty common, but problematic, meaning there's a problem with it. And this would be the spelling of O. Yes, O. Very commonly there's an N after the O, but not always. So let's look at some examples here. We have on. It's not on, right? It's just this sound. There's no W, there's no lips, it's just ah. Ah plus n. And there's many words based on that, like con. We have bond, long, L-O-N-G. But then we also have words with O that don't end with N or ng. That's actually a different consonant, which would be like mock, mock. So this is spelled with a CK, it's just a K sound, k, mock. Or pock, flock. Of course, we can take the F off and say lock, right? Like the lock on your door so nobody gets in. And there might be some other combinations, an N at the end, a K at the end. There might be others, but it's just an O here. All right, let's take a look at the homework. And by the way, this IPA symbol, this is the symbol in IPA, it looks kind of like a lowercase a, but that's just for your reference on the chart. That is the symbol you will see when you download this chart from my website, which you can find again in the description below. So for the homework, as usual, same thing, okay? We're gonna have a recording for the ah sound, which just has words with ah that you listen and repeat. And then we will also, of course, have a listening dictation. And just like last time, I want you to write what you hear, mark syllables and intonation. What are the syllables in the word and how many syllables are in each word, and the intonation at the end. Does it go up? Does it go down? I want you to mark content or function, which again, you can just do with a C or an F for each word, content or function. So thank you guys so much for watching another English Hacks video. Don't forget to subscribe and check out these other videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one.